All right. How do I sound? Okay. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to get a chance to speak in front of everybody today. As mentioned, we're doing something a little different today. We're going to be live on Facebook, so hopefully this message gets to someone who's not able to be here today and really serve as a blessing. This is a message that I went back and forth on a few times over the course of this year of, do I want to get up and say this or do I not? Is this something that I really want to share, or is it just retreating everything that's been said before? And every time I would get close, I said, no, I really don't want to come forth and share. This is just going over what everybody had said before. And God was really pushing me and pushing me and pushing me forward to come out and share this. So the first time I was up to preach, it took me 4 years to build up that sermon. This one only took me 2. So I'm believing that it'll be just as good with half as much time. And it's especially a blessing to be able to speak at this time of the year. I really feel like we're hitting that home stretch in 2016. Can you believe it's November already? Next week, John Ebel will be here from Hamlin New Testament. As Joan mentioned, in a few weeks, we will have our family service in the afternoon, and then it's Christmas and New Year, and then it's 2017. So I want to talk a little bit today about the calling and the purposes of the desert. But before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about the times, the generations. We have uncertain political time, things are changing, the new year. And I just want to talk a little bit about the different generations. Some might call it the millennials and the baby boomers, or the Gen X, Gen Yers, and the World War era. For the purposes of today, I'm just going to give a high-level overview that hopefully ties everything together. We're going to call it the previous generation. The previous generation looked at the world a lot differently than my generation does. Very strong work ethic. They're willing to work hard for that end result. They're sacrificing the now for the hope of the later. Resourceful and focused, disciplined, and tough. Like these gentlemen over here, they're not afraid to put in some manual labor to get the job done. Now, what I'm going to call the current generation, we look at things differently. Again, it can be the millennials, Gen X, Gen Y, whatever you want to say it. Very focused on work-life balance. We want to have our now and we want to have our later. We want to work hard, but we want to also enjoy the fruits of our labor. Amen. Spontaneous. We can get up and go, have a change in direction in our lives just like that, and something we'd worked on for years, go in a completely different direction. We believe in technology, again, as we're live on Facebook. We want comfort. We work hard, we're tired. We're tired. I know for me at work, I'm high energy all the time. I get home, my 2 boys, high energy. At the end of the day, I just want to rest. And that's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. But sometimes while we're in our comfort, we can miss that calling from God. There's definitely seasons where God calls us to rest, where he calls us to comfort. But I found that God is really doing that strong refinement, that tuning, that strengthening in the deep. And we don't get that if we stay in bed. So before I get too much into my story, I want to talk about defining what the calling is. So for people of the previous generation, they might look at, if they want to know something, go to a library, look it up in the dictionary. What I do of the current generation, I go to Google. The first thing I did was I looked up what Google defines a calling as. The loud cries or shouts of an animal or a person? Okay. A strong urge towards a particular way of life, a career or vocation. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's getting a little warmer, but it didn't really resonate to me. It didn't hit the mark. So I said, all right, I'm going to go back to where I know I can get a good, solid answer with some meat behind it. And I went back to Webster's 1828 dictionary. So more accurately, they describe the calling as a divine summons, vocation, or invitation. I saw that and I said, yes, that's exactly what I'm looking for. So how does the calling happen? The understanding that I got from really praying about this is by God calling you out of the normal and into the supernormal. Or a better translation, God calling you out of the comfort, out of your bed, into the desert. So, what is the desert? A few weeks ago over the summer, Pastor Josh talked about how to study the Bible. And as I was preparing for my sermon today, I said, all right, what is the desert? What does it really mean? I'm going to go back and I'm going to study it. I'm going to get a definition of what it means. And I found two common biblical uses of the word. The first, the Strong's Hebrew, word number 4057, is midbar. It means an uninhabited place. And then in the Greek, the word eremos, an uncultivated, unpopulated place, a desolate, deserted area, a barren, solitary place that also provides needed quiet, freedom from disturbance. And those have been used in between both for the Old Testament and the New Testament, talking about Moses, Abraham, and their trials. So now that we have defined what Strong says about what the desert is, what's the purpose of the desert? And that was something I really was praying about, thinking about what can I do that will make it effective, what will really resonate with people. And I thought about it, and this is what I came up with is the purpose of the desert. Graveyard, a place in the wilderness for your bones to lay once you're down. I didn't define whose purpose that is for the desert, though. That's the enemy's purpose for the desert. He wants us to be like the old generation of the children of Israel. We give up hope, we see the vision of God, but we don't see the way where we get from where we are to his promise, and we die in the desert living unfulfilled. What is the real purpose of the desert? What's God's purpose? It's something more like this. It is a training ground, a spot where God will take you from where you are right now and specifically, deliberately, and intentionally train you for the trial that he has you prepared against to get you ready, to make you wholly and fully equipped to get to where you are now, to see his promise. So I was doing some studying, like, I need to have some good, relevant examples to use in this to describe something from there. I'm like looking, all right, what's something that I can hit at least, hopefully somebody will get this reference so it's not out in the blue. And so there's got to be some boxer who at some point had to radically change their approach to become more successful. So I started looking up and I said, I like Evander Holyfield. He's a Christian, good moral guy. Let me see what his was. And it turns out he fit just the criteria that we needed. In his early career, he was known as a tremendous slugger. He had a lot of power behind his boxing, but he didn't have stamina. And as he was preparing for a fight in the 1990s against Buster Douglas, the man who, at the time, some considered the best boxer on the planet, having defeated Mike Tyson in his prime, they said, we need to rethink your approach. They ran him through some cardio training, some drills that simulated a 3-minute boxing round. And as he was going through those drills, they found that it took him approximately 8 minutes to recover from a 3-minute round. Now, I don't know much about boxing, but there's not 8 minutes in between for a rest period. So to prepare for this fight, they had to change the way that he had to approach things. In essence, he had to die to his identity. Pastor Gary said a few weeks ago in his sermon about death of a vision, the desert's also a place for death of your identity. They trained him aerobic training, anaerobic training, something to focus his power but also build up his endurance. He ended up beating Buster Douglas. He also was one of the few who also beat Mike Tyson in his prime, beat Mike Tyson in a boxing match multiple occasions. So, on top of that, I think God's intention in the desert is a lot like the story that someone shared to me recently that I really loved and wanted to find a way to work it in. One Sunday morning at a small southern church, the new pastor called on one of the older deacons to lead the opening prayer. The deacon stood up, bowed his head, and prayed, "Lord, I hate buttermilk." The pastor opened one eye, wondering where this was going, but the deacon continued, "Lord, I hate lard." Now the pastor was totally perplexed. The deacon continued on, "Lord, I ain't too fond of plain flour either. But after you mix them all together and bake them in a hot oven, I just love biscuits." Lord, help us to realize that when life gets hard, when things come up that we don't like, whatever we don't understand what you are doing, that we need to wait and see what you're making. After you get through mixing and baking, it'll probably be something even better than biscuits. Amen. So now we've talked a little bit about what the calling is, what the desert is. Let's talk about some examples of calling. First and foremost is Abraham being called out of his father's land. Now in this case, God clearly told him what to expect. The Lord said to Abraham, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. All the people of the earth will be blessed through you." Now that's a great calling, right? We know what to expect, what's going to happen, and there's a promise at the end. It doesn't always work out like that. Another example is Moses being called out while leading sheep at his father-in-law's house. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, "I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up." That's first sign something might be happening there out of the ordinary, right? So when the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him within the bush, "Moses, Moses." And Moses said, "Here I am." "Do not come any closer," God said. "Take off your sandals, for the place you are standing is holy ground." Then he said, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. The Lord said, "I have indeed seen the suffering of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the land of the Egyptians and to bring them out of that land into the good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go, I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt." But Moses said to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh to bring the Israelites out of Egypt?" And God said, "I will be with you, and this will be a sign to you that it is I who sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain." Moses said, "Suppose I go to the Israelites and tell them, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you.' And they ask me, 'What is his name?' Then what should I tell them?" God said to Moses, "I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. 'I am has sent me to you.'" Now, I like Moses. I can say safely there have been times that God has called me and I've said, "Whoa, God, are you really sure you want me? I think you want somebody else. Who am I?" And he said, "Nope, go, Larry. I've called you." I said, "No, I don't do too well with people. Why don't you send Josh? He's good." And I said, "Nope, I've called you. You go do this." Another example is Jesus after his baptism. Again, serving in, showing that God has got us all on the same page today, which I'm thankful and I'm blessed for. I wish that we all reacted to the calling like he did. And Jesus was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. After fasting 40 days and 40 nights, he was hungry. Then the tempter came to him and said, "If you are the Son of God, tell these stones to become bread." And Jesus answered, "It is written, 'Man shall not live on the bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God.'" Then the devil took him to the holy city and had him stand on the highest point of the temple. "If you are the Son of God, then throw yourself down, for it is written, 'He will not strike your foot against a stone.'" Jesus answered him, "It is written, 'Do not put the Lord your God to the test.'" Again the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdom of the world and their splendor. "All of this I will give you," he said, "if you bow down and worship me." Jesus said to him, "Away from me, Satan, for it is written, 'Worship the Lord your God and serve him only.'" Then the devil left him, and angels came and attended to him. How many times when we're in that desert season can we say, we hit it on the mark like Jesus did? Every time temptation came up, we responded with the scripture, we resisted the devil, and he'll flee. I would love to say I'm perfect at that, but I'm not going to lie up here on the mic. But the calling isn't always audible. Sometimes it comes in other forms, like with Joseph. Now, Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he had been born to him in his old age, and he had made an ornate robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Joseph had a dream. When he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. Then he said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, when your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." His brothers said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually reign over us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream, as if he didn't learn enough the first time around. "Listen," he said, "I had another dream, and this time the sun and the moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." When he told his father, as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream you've had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come down and bow to the ground before you?" His brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. I like Joseph. You know why? He was a man of vision even at his early age. He was a man of vision even at an early age. He was successful despite his setbacks, and he kept his eye on God's promise, and he lived upright with integrity. When his brothers came before him when there was famine in the land, he could have said, "Oh, look who's bowing before me now." But instead he said, "You intended this for evil, but God intended this for good." He was given preferential treatment. Some of the commentaries believe that he lived a very comfortable life. When they mention the ornate robe or coat, sometimes it talks about it being multicolored. It means also meant long sleeves or having many pockets, giving the idea that he didn't have to do a lot of work or he was spoiled. As an only child, I can relate to Joseph. I've been able to get away with a lot of things. I've been able to pawn off having to do chores that maybe if I didn't get only child syndrome, I would have had to take care of in my life. Like people in my generation, I like things comfortable, kind of like how Joseph had it. So when God called me, it was especially surprising because I got a call to go to one place I never thought I would go, to Haiti. If you had asked me 2 years ago if I ever thought I'd go on a mission trip, I would say nope. And then I eventually softened my stance and I said, okay, here's the criteria that would take for me to go on a mission trip. I need somebody to come up and specifically ask me. I need my ticket to be paid for, and I need to have agreement. And when Morning Star as a church decided they were going to go down to support the share feast a few years ago, I said, oh, well, that's nice. I have no interest in going to Haiti. And I left it at that. But the call kept ringing. Even though I tried to hit the ignore button, the call kept coming through, and I kept poking, and I said, all right, I need to at least think about it. And my wife and I, we talked about it, and we prayed about it, and she said, if you really feel like this is God leading you, then let's go. And so I prayed about it some more, and I finally one day hit it. I said, yes, I'm going to Haiti. Didn't really know all that was going to entail, and as the folks who are here with me know, I threw up a whole lot more than I had ever thought about throwing up. But that's really when God was calling me into a different spot. He was moving me from where I was into where I need to be. Pretty much the Sunday after we got home, really 3 days after, Prophet Hector came to preach at our church for the anniversary service, and he gave a word to me. He said that even right now, there are people in my job who are coming around me who are forming against me, but God is going to bless me. God's going to bless me financially, and the more that people come against me, the more that God is going to bless me because He is in control of the situation. I thought, well, hey, that's cool. I've got it good at work right now. I'm leading a team that is performing better than it ever had. I'm kind of the golden child, so if people are coming against me now, this is easy. What is the blessing going to look like? Whew. Literally, just about as I stepped foot back from Haiti, things started changing. It seemed like no matter what I did, no matter what was going, it was always wrong. It was the wrong things Realistically, what it was my time to start moving. It's just like the children of Israel in Exodus 1, 8 through 11. They had a good life in Egypt. For many, many years, it was good. They were provided for. They had blessing. They were fruitful. But then one day, all of that changed. Until the new king, to whom Joseph meant nothing, came to power in Egypt. Look, he said to his people, the Israelites have become far too numerous for us. Come, we must deal shrewdly with them, or they will become even more numerous. And if war breaks out, they will join our enemies and fight against us and leave the country. So they put slave masters over them to oppress them with forced labor. It was a tough few months there. No matter what I did, I felt that push to get out. I didn't really know what the next steps for me were. Hector came back a few months later, and he gave me another word. I felt called to talk about how I'm starting to get unsatisfied where I'm at, where I'm starting to look for different jobs, and how the different areas where I didn't feel like I met the competencies that they were looking for. And he said, brother, you're in a season of shifting. God is going to take you to a spot where your passion and your skill set meet, and you're going to go forward and love what you do. So I held on to that. I thought that just meant I needed to move from one spot in my company to a different spot, and everything would be great. But God had a different plan. Just like he took Jeremiah and showed him the vision of the potter and the wheel. He said, this is the word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord. Go down to the potter's house, and there I will give you a message. So I went down to the potter's house, and I saw him working at the wheel. But the pot he was shaping from the clay was marred in his hands, so the potter formed it into another pot, shaping it as seemed best to him. Then the word of the Lord came to me. He said, can I not do with you, Israel, as this potter does? Declares the Lord. Like clay in the hands of a potter, so are you in my hands. God was saying, I'm shifting you. I'm moving you. I'm bringing you to a different spot. You need to just go with me. Stay loose. Be flexible. Don't worry. Just go forward. Now, I'd love to tell you that I did that, but I didn't. As 2015 came to a close, I felt more like Nebuchadnezzar. I was looking around and everything that I had built, all the hard work, all the effort, all the time that I spent in to get myself established, I saw it all get taken away while I was shifting. And I felt like, Nebuchadnezzar eating the wild grass. It was around that time that a song from Coldplay started playing on the radio that really hit me, that I had never really listened to the lyrics. It was always, oh yeah. However, all their songs go, all the chorus is always the same. But from their song, Viva La Vida, the lyrics really hit me one day. I used to rule the world. Seas would rise when I gave the word. Now in the morning I sleep alone and sweep the streets I used to own. I used to roll the dice, feel the fear in my enemy's eyes, listened as the crowd would sing, now the old king is dead, long live the king. 1 minute I held the key, next the walls were closed on me. And I discovered that my castles stand upon pillars of salt, pillars of sand. I'm like, wow, that hit a little too close to home for me. Especially because 2016 we had a very special word for Morningstar. Does anybody remember what that word was? Hope. Hope. Everybody was talking about hope. 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 This is a year of hope. But from where I was standing, it felt more like nope. I saw my hope flying away. I'd been on interview after interview after interview, week after week after week, month after month, and I was always the second runner-up. Or I was always, well, we like what you bring, but we found somebody with more relevant experience. And I was everywhere that I could, I was trying to interview. I was getting weary. I was getting tired. I was getting frustrated. I saw that everybody around me was getting blessed. People were telling stories about, I was in this situation, and God worked it out, and I got this huge bonus and took care of my bills. Or, I was praying about this job opportunity to open up, and out of nowhere, they created this new job for me. And I said, that's nice. That's nice. And truthfully, I had forgotten about my prophetic word that Hector had. I had it on my phone. Could have listened to it every day on the way into work while I was in despair, but I forgot. God was gracious, though. Step by step, just like with Elijah, the ravens were there to feed me. But I tell you, church, if I had found a cactus in the desert, I would have laid on there and I would have died. It was tough. Little did I know God was moving. He was taking me out of my comfort zone all the way over here to where the magic happens. And in the trials, I was getting step by step. I was trying to stay positive. And God really worked in funny and mysterious ways for me. Because as I was trying to speak death, I was trying to speak against his encouragement, I saw the limited power of Verizon Wireless. I'd be talking to one of my mentors who's a Christian who told me about all the times that God had came through when he had lost his job. And he said, the first time I lost my job, I was stressed. I was worried. How am I going to pay for diapers for my child? But God provided. God got him a better job than he had been. And he was telling me about how when he left the company, we'd worked together. But God, again, when he was in that situation, he said, God worked this time, and he took care of me the last time I was in the situation, so I'm just going to sit back, and I'm going to trust him, and I'm going to enjoy my time. And I said, that's all fine and good, but here's what's going on for me. As I was about to say, I don't believe God has a good plan for me. My phone had disconnected. He called me back, and he said, Larry, whatever you were going to say probably wasn't worth repeating. So he moved right along. Another time I was sitting in my house, texting Josh, about to say, I don't think there's a good plan for me. Full bars, full coverage, and all of a sudden a call that should have rang to my phone went straight to voicemail, and as I'm typing that, I'm about to hit send, that pop-up notification came up, so one new voicemail. I'm like, let me look at that. And it was an opportunity to interview for another job with the town of Greece, and I said, hey, that's great, it's right in my town. It's close by home, cool. So it was just a little bit of manna getting me through, a little bit of sustenance to keep me moving step by step. My favorite, though, I got a text one day from Pastor Gary who said, keep strong, brother, keep pressing in because we're going to be taking off soon. And I said, man, Gary's got some faith. He's really believing in this situation more than me. Come to find out that he and Joan were on a cruise. Literally, they were about to take off. And then one day, I finally started listening to some advice, and I went through and I was reading the Psalms, and David, he kept it real. He said, God, there's a lot that stinks right now. This is an unfair situation, and I don't like it. And he poured out his complaints before God, and then those were met with complaint, and then, God, here's what you're doing, and here's what you're doing, and here's what you're doing. So I started doing that, and my mind started to change. Around that same time, I found a website called the Players Tribune. It's a site where professional athletes go to write commentaries, to give their thoughts on things, to, as recently talk about where they're changing teams in free agency, announcing their retirement, all the big things. And one section that I really love is called Letters to My Former Self. It's where people who are established in their career, maybe shortly after they retire, go back and they write a letter to their younger selves to say, hey, in this situation, keep focused. Hey, in this situation, don't worry. Hey, when you're in this situation, you're going to want to go this way instead, because it's going to work out better for you. And I'd been praying, and I really felt led that I need to write a letter to my current self. And I just sat down on my lunch break at work in my car, just writing, and at one point I didn't even realize what I was writing anymore, and God took over, and he showed me something, and he said, thus says the Lord, I'm going to get you through the desert. I'm not the God who lets my people die before they cross the Red Sea. You're not going to dry up. You're not going to fall on this side of the sea. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take care of Pharaoh's army. You don't worry. And then I started writing. He said, and you need to know, I love you like you love your boys. And then I wrote that out and then said, no, I love you, Larry, like you love Judah and Levi. I had a breakthrough at that point. I knew God loved me. In here, I knew conceptually that God loves us, but he broke through and he said, you know what? This is how I love you. It's like that song, How He Loves Us. It says, when like a sloppy wet kiss, my heart moved violently inside of my chest. And then that changed my whole perspective. Breakthrough finally came. 5 days later, I got an offer from another job that I get away from where I was. This was a good job, it had good benefits, and it was a good oasis in the desert. But it wasn't my ultimate spot. About a week or so before I was going to start there, I got a call for the interview for my current job that I'm in now. And I had applied for them, I want to say it was December or January, I don't even remember when, but there was a long gap in between. That vision had long died. I had given up hope, and they said, okay, well, we'd like you to come in and interview. And I said, sure, I'll do it. What's the worst that could happen? I'm going to come in, and I'm going to be the measuring stick for whoever they ultimately select. Then they called me for a second interview, and I said, all right, I'll go forward and see what we can do, but I'm not too optimistic. I've been burned in the past in leadership, and I'm going to just be the measuring stick for whoever they end up picking. And then I noticed after the second interview, as I was driving past my office every day to this other job, my heart started changing. I said, Lord, okay, whoever they pick, prepare them for that situation. Let them be a blessing. Let it be somebody uniquely qualified. And if that's me, Lord, then prepare me. But if it's me, then you need to prepare somebody else to come in and fill my spot at this company, because I want them to be blessed for letting me get a rest in there. But I know that you've called me, that I'm going to go forward and love what I do. So if I'm called to be here, then Lord, help me fall in love with this job. And that went for a couple weeks. And then finally, I got the offer. Got the offer to come to this company, and I thought, man, everything is amazing. Finally got through after all my trials, and something that came up was I was going through cleaning out my car. I found the letter that I wrote to myself, and there was a spot at the end that I completely forgot about. It said, and thus says the Lord, when I get you through the desert, I will redeem the years lost to the locusts. And I'm like, what was this? What years? I mean, yeah, that's a nice verse that I throw out, but what did I mean here? And then I forgot. I had a plan of where I wanted to be, where I wanted to see myself in my career development, and this job actually got me 2 years ahead of my schedule from where I was. I had long given up on that dream, and God brought that back. So blessings rain down. Not just for me, not just for my family, but also at my other company. The person who was training me at my last job was a Christian, good brother, so I told him shortly after I told my boss that I'd be leaving, because I wanted him to hear it from me first. And he said, that's really funny, because I've been praying with my wife. I'm not really in love with the job that I am in right now. He had taken that to free up the job that I was doing at that company. I really wanted to go back to what I was doing, but I couldn't because you were there. So, by this opportunity opening up for me, it allowed him to go back to where he was. And then, it turns out that it was a blessing for my company as well. Little did I know that shortly after Hector gave me that first word that I would go forward and and love what I do, that at my current job, God was working to make a way for me. My predecessor was somebody who was known for abusing their power, terminating people just because they could, to know that, hey, I've got this authority, respect me. So some Christians would get together and they pray, and I actually found this out from having a conversation with my brother Walter, who was here a few months ago to help worship, and he said, I knew there was something special about him from the get-go, the first time that I met him. He shared his story about his victory over stage 4 lymphoma, how God had healed him, how he had been involved in the agency and things that God was doing, and how he and some other brothers and sisters were praying that we don't want blood on our hands, God, but this situation is unfair. You need to do something about it. And as I told him about the word that from Hector, his eyes started tearing up, and I said, what's going on? He said that was about the beginning of November, and I said, yeah, why? Before Thanksgiving, that's when we really started setting our hearts to pray and for God to bring somebody that's a man after his own heart. Walter took vacation in December for about 2 weeks. January 2nd, the first day in January, my predecessor was let go from the company. So it's all about the perspective, and now going from a spot where people had turned against me to Christians who believe in me, who are praying for me, who are supportive and uplifting. It's amazing. And the best part about that is when Walter and I were having our conversation, he said, when you were walking around, when we met, when you were leaving away, God spoke to me and he said, this right here is the man that you've been praying for. This is the man that I'm bringing to you. So of course I told him, like, Walter, why didn't you stop me and tell me? Because that was a couple weeks that I was fretting about it. He said, you had to go through. So why does God call us into the wilderness? A couple reasons. To give us a new identity. We have to die to ourselves in order for him to work us into what he has designed for us. We have to be like that clay on the potter's wheel. If we get marred, he's got to move us into his vision. Like Abraham became the father of many nations. Moses was a deliverer. Jesus got into his public ministry. And then, to close, a couple more things of what we should do on our way through the desert. Focus on the breakthrough. Don't look at the sand. Don't look at the wind. Don't look around at the vultures flying over you, waiting for your carcass to drop. Focus on the breakthrough. Look at that other side of the Red Sea. Seek the truth in Scripture. So what is the enemy going to do while you're walking through the desert? He's going to try to get you to focus on you're going to die. You have God's promise, but you're not going to see it. God's not capable enough to get you through it. Focus on the truth. Cry out to God. Even if you're saying, Lord, I hate this situation, cry out to him. Let him speak to you, because once you're done, you're going to find your heart changing, and your prayers are going to turn around, and you're going to be praising, and you're going to have that fellowship with him. Stay connected to your church family. If I didn't keep connected to all of you during my time, again, I would have been left there in the desert. Keep moving forward. Most importantly, remember, God gave you this desert season for a reason. To make you a champion. That you can stand victorious at the end of your fight. And then a couple of questions for closing. Are you in a desert season in your spiritual life today? Or do you know somebody who is that you could encourage with God's plan and purpose for such a season? Thank you, folks, for giving me the opportunity to come up and preach today and share my story. It's like the song from the Line in the Desert song. In this time in the harvest, I've been filled to be emptied again. This was my seed, and hopefully, if somebody here, somebody watching on Facebook, somebody that randomly catches us on YouTube will be blessed by this and strengthened. Thank you, everybody. Pastor.
One of the big benefits out of that, there's so many things. You're not streaming this, are you? No. Goodbye. What a wonderful thing to have people at your work praying for you. Usually that only happens in a church. People are praying for the pastor. But in a secular job, have Christians praying for you that you'd succeed. It's only the grace of God could do that. So thank you, brother. It was an awesome testimony and sharing, and so glad to be able to live this life with Larry. Some of those things you probably know about, maybe not all of them that he was going through, but we're doing life together. Those are some hard things, but God has brought him through, and he wants to bring us all through and give us testimonies and sharing and, and all that. So here's what I'd like to do for those that would be willing before we have our coffee over there. I shared last week at the end of the service about some of the diagnosis that Ann had received. I think we'd like to pray for you. Would that be okay, Ann? So come on up, those that would like to pray for her. We're just going to lay hands and pray. She's looking for a second diagnosis out at in Buffalo at or Ketter? No.